Well, everybody, as promised, we are here with Jen Shahade. And Jen, first of all, hey, hi. For those of you who are watching on video, Jen's waving. Thanks so much for being with us, Jen. And we're joined by John Somsky, too. So we'll kind of have a three person conversation. But Jen, where are you calling in from?
Well, I'm in Philadelphia right now. That's where I live.
So that you're born in, okay, so I knew you were born in Philly, right?
Oh, yeah. I was born in Philadelphia, went to high school here, and then I went to college in New York, lived there for a while. But I came back to Philly. I really love the city. It's a great landing place for just international travel, for chess, for poker. It's a really fun city to live in. It's pretty affordable to live right in the center of the city, which I like.
Yeah, no, we were sort of making this habit of having Philadelphia people on here, and as a Minnesota Vikings fan, it's sort of I don't know how we're feeling about this Philadelphia connections, but we'll let you go anyway, I guess.
Well, what other Philly people have you had on recently?
Well, was Matros? Was Matt Matros a Philly guy?
He's actually New York.
He was New York.
But
John, do you remember who the last person on that was Philly? They said they're Philly, but they were going to let it.
I remember that, but I don't remember who it was.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of poker players in Philadelphia because we're so close to all these great casinos and, not so far from New Jersey either. So yeah, and apparently online poker is coming to PA in July 15th. And so I think it's actually going to be even more poker players flocking to this area, which I'm excited about.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your background now. I know it's, pretty much you're known most, I'd say, probably for your chess background, right? Is that kind of, do you consider yourself a chess player before you consider yourself a poker player, or?
I don't really think about myself in that way, like what I consider myself as. It's hard to say. Sure, I played chess. I love chess. It's a great game, and I used to play it professionally. So yeah, it's been a huge part of my life and will always be a part of my life.
And it's part of your whole family's life, right? I was reading sort of your bio, and it seems like everybody played chess in your family, right?
Yeah, well, my mom played a little bit, but my dad was a multi-time PA state champion, and my brother's an international master who also used to play professional poker. Oh. And then, yeah, so the two of them are very strong chess players as well. So it is kind of a family thing.
So did you grow up playing poker also, or did chess kind of somehow lead into poker, or how did you get into poker?
Yes, chess led into poker because so many of my friends kind of quit chess to pick up poker. So we're kind of straddled both worlds, but yes, it did happen more that way. I didn't play poker as a kid at all, although my mom did. I remember that she played these weekly poker games, and they played all sorts of different games, and it was just like her time slot that on Saturday afternoons, she always played poker. And I remember she told me a story about how when she got pregnant, some of her more conservative friends told her that she would never play poker again. And she looked at them and said, I'm still going to play those Saturday poker games. And it is very true that she did just that.
And so, man, it's a really cool background, super interesting background. And you're also a writer, and you have a degree in literature, right? That's part of your story.
Yeah, that's true. And I maybe that led into the fact that soon after graduating college, I wrote Chess Bitch, which is a story, which is like the story of my own chess career. And that was definitely informed by doing so much reading and writing in college and realizing that chess intersected with all these kinds of gender issues that I was reading about. And yeah, I had so much fun writing that book. That was one of the best times of my life. And I think got me kind of addicted to this idea of projects, like big projects that you kind of like can sink your teeth into and get totally engrossed in.
So let's talk a little bit about that book then. So it's called Chess Bitch, but the subtitle, Women in the Ultimate Intellectual Sport. And so what was sort of the angle that you took with that? Was it just sort of your personal experience, or were you looking at it more from a gender perspective, social norms, or what was kind of your angle there?
Well, it was like 50% my story interwoven with stories of top women players from the past, and then a little bit of analysis of how playing chess was both was colored by your gender. So what kinds of experience women chess players had, what ways they were perceived by playing chess, kind of similar to some issues that we see in poker. like in chess and in poker, we often hear people talking about players' appearances a lot more than even in the general culture. I mean, of course, people are much more obsessed with feminine appearance, but in chess and poker, it seems to be even exaggerated because women are in the minority. And lots of other issues too, like in both worlds, it feels like kind of like an almost obsessive compulsion with questions like, why are there sometimes separate tournaments, and are women capable of being the very best? All kind of like legitimate questions, but the kind of obsession in both worlds with them, I think, shows that the way the question is being asked is often coming from like a disingenuous place. So yeah, I'm really interested in those issues. So I brought up some of those in Chess Bitch, and they've kind of come along with me my whole life, for better or worse.
So do you think some of the conversations that people are trying to have about gender in poker or chess or anything like that are actually doing more harm than good because of the way that they're approached?
Yes, I do. I think that the way that the questions are framed are sometimes very negative, and they're more likely to create more negative conversation, which is never good. So when I wrote Chess Bitch, and actually with a lot of my female empowerment work, one thing that I often like to do is try to focus on the positives. So talk about women who are doing well, and history, stories of women who have succeeded in chess and who have had fascinating lives, rather than kind of like obsess over things like, is the female brain different? And is that why there's not as many women who play? Because I think that those types of questions, unless you're actually like a scientist or a biologist, usually they just lead to some kind of circular negative reasoning. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. And I feel like in Chess Pitch, that's why I kind of try to focus on the storytelling elements. And in a lot of my work now with female empowerment in chess, it's just about finding girls and women who could get a lot out of chess and coaching them. So that's a big part of my life. I'm the program director for US Chess Women. So I try to raise money for girls and women, to get more women and girls into chess, especially those who kind of intersect with other populations that might benefit a lot from chess. And I try to go out and do ambassadorial work, teach people chess, tell them the benefits of chess. That's kind of the main thing that I do outside poker right now.
So as you think about the I'll call it gender inequality, just for a lack of a better term, in terms of just the pure numbers of people playing poker. What I guess as you look at that, is it a cause for alarm for you? Would you categorize it as a problem, or is it more of this is sort of social conditioning that little by little we're chipping away and it's just becoming more mainstream for there to be more diversity? Like how do you frame this? I see 3 or 4% of the people playing the main event are women, or whatever the percentages are, pick a number. What sort of lens do you look at that through? Do you look at it through a problem lens, or tell me a little bit about how you frame that?
Well, I think with the main event being $10,000, one thing that poker is it's a mirror for some issues that we just have in the world in general. And there's a huge wage gap between women's and men's salaries. But I think even beyond that, there's also a very big wealth gap. So being able to just have $10,000 to play a poker tournament, it's just going to be less likely for women to be able to have that money. And I do think that's a problem because it's a microcosm for other types of investments that women might not be able to make because they don't have as much capital, or people aren't as willing to invest in them. Because of course, we know that many people playing in the main event are selling action, and that's definitely an issue as well. So yeah, I see it certainly as something that we would want to change. I mean, that said, the main event is a really, really grueling schedule. And since women are definitely, I'm not going to say burdened, because it's also a blessing to, take care of children. There are definitely do more of that work taking care of children in this country. So with the grueling schedule of it doesn't necessarily fit the moms or dads schedules very well, but particularly moms, right?
Right.
Especially if you're in some kind of phase of breastfeeding or pregnancy. So yeah, I think, I never really liked the grueling schedule of the WSOP. I kind of prefer like EPTs or some of the WPTs that end at like 7:00 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think I'd like to see more variety in the WSOP because maybe that would allow for more parents, let alone just women, to participate. Like, for instance, I have some friends who are going to Vegas with their kids, and they might find like a good daycare, but it's like 8 to 6. Would it be cool if we had some events that could actually fit a schedule like that? I think so.
Yeah, no, and so that's a good point about the main event. Is that, but if you go to the EPT, and I've never, well, I guess I played in Ireland, but I've never really played a lot in Europe. Do you see the same sort of diversity gap there, or is there something that's a little bit more diverse in Europe?
I mean, honestly, I think I don't have the numbers in front of me, but as far as women goes, it might actually be better here.
Okay.
I think it's very typical. This happens in chess as well, where in America, it seems that for some reason, and I'm sure it's based on supply and demand to some extent, but for some reason, tournament schedules, whether it's chess or poker, are so grueling. It's like they think that if somebody gets a break, they don't want to do anything but play poker. They just want to play poker for 14 hours. It's exactly the same with chess. And then in Europe, when they have poker tournaments or chess tournaments, usually they leave like some time for you to maybe go out and have a dinner. Not all EPTs, but usually it's a little bit more like that. Maybe you'd finish at like 9:30 instead of like midnight, right?
Right. So I'm trying to think about the comments that you made about, seeing the main event or other events, just kind of this diversity thing is sort of a symptom of a bigger issue, right? Of either its wage gap or other gender issues. So as we look at, as somebody who I believe my heart is in the right place, I just don't know what to do. And that's why I'm having guests like you on to help understand how can I use whatever platform that we have with RecPoker to help with the diversity issue. Because I'm a firm believer that a community is only as strong as the diversity that it has. And so obviously there's societal issues, and I'm involved in some of those, trying to figure out what can we do there. But from a pure poker perspective, like what sort of message would you like to see the podcast giving, or what sort of guests would you like to see us have on that might help push the rock up the hill a little bit? I mean, is there anything that we can do as a middle-aged white privileged male? I agree. I admit it. Nothing I can do about that. But what can I do to, help, for lack of a better word?
Well, I think getting guests that represent diversity on your show is very good. And then I think in general, there's always ways to kind of try to be on the lookout. If you think that there's an underrepresented population in poker, be on the lookout for ways to make connections for them, because our world is actually really cliquey. I think that it's easy to forget that once you're more embedded in the world and you make lots of connections really quickly, because it seems so warm and welcoming when you're part of it.
Right.
But I noticed this week on Twitter, a lot of people were sharing memories of their first WSOP. And it's like, I didn't really participate because I remember my first WSOP, I didn't know anyone. And I was just going there as like kind of like for fun, as a total recreational player in between, chess responsibilities, because I was like doing all sorts of chess writing and commentary and editing work. I had some friends who were professionals, but they weren't there at that time. And I felt like it was a really cold atmosphere at that time, even though that was like the poker boom when there were supposed to be all these parties and like amazing things going on. It's funny, like I didn't sense that at all. Like I have so much more fun when I go now, and it seems so much more festive. So I think it's funny. It's just like about perspective in that way, and making sure that you're kind of looking at it from the eyes of an outsider, even if you are kind of in some kind of insider situation.
Right. Yeah. And I think that intentional connection, I think, is a good point. I think I know that sometimes you kind of go down that line of saying, hey, I'm trying to intentionally include certain people. And sometimes that can be perceived as pity or something else. So there's always kind of that fine line for me. And maybe that's just my people pleaser in me. I want to make sure everybody's happy. But, that's always the line I feel like I'm walking a little bit.
Oh, that's a great point. I have a friend who is really just so brilliant on these issues of like diversity, and sometimes she calls it, she has a term for it, which is great for your podcast. I don't remember who coined it, but I know that my friend Shonda often talks about quote unquote recreational diversity. And she says that like at her university that she worked, different university cultures, sometimes it seems that people are trying, because they're so interested in diversity, they're trying to get people to come and speak about diversity and consult on diversity. And that sometimes it's actually a big emotional burden on the people who are, really trying to get ahead and, do work, right? So I know what you mean, that sometimes you're not sure if by trying to consult with someone who's underrepresented in the poker world, if you're doing a good thing or if you're overdoing it. And so I think the main thing is to talk to people about it and be open to changing your mind and not stubborn. Because of course we're all going to make mistakes along the way of trying to make the world better.
Right. Yeah. And I'd rather err on the side of being inclusive and being diverse. But I know I've worked, 30 years in the corporate world, and a number of those in like workforce analytics and working with CEOs on diversity issues and trying some of those things. I know those are some of the backlash that comes up sometimes as people are trying to be intentionally diverse, that it can actually have a negative effect. So I'm trying to be really, tuned into that. And kind of like you said, I mean, I'm not going to know what it's like to be a woman playing poker. I just won't. That's where having people like you on the show to help explain some of that thing and give us, I guess, a new pair of glasses to look through is super helpful.
Yeah, generally, I think that it's really fun to be a woman in poker from my perspective. But I think you can see that a lot of the women in poker are extroverted, and perhaps the ones who are put off by the extra attention that they're getting, they don't stay with poker. So there's a bit of a survivorship bias, I think, when you ask, like, is it fun to be a woman in poker? You know what I mean? Like, obviously, you're still playing, so there's a good chance you think the answer is yes, but there might have been people who were put off from it and don't play anymore. And then we look at our numbers, they're not good.
So how do you, so I'm kind of curious about the experience that you've had as a woman in chess and in poker. And forgive me, I mean, I know how to play chess, but I've never played competitively at all. So I guess I picture chess as you against one opponent. And yeah, you could be in a minority of women playing in that tournament or whatever that situation is, versus at a poker table where there might be 8 or 9 other guys there and one woman. Are there the similarities, differences? What's sort of the, I don't know. I'm just trying to kind of, what is that environment like? Is it similar between poker and chess, or is it quite a bit different?
Well, the thing about chess is that there's so much resources devoted to chess because of the educational element. I mean, in the United States, for instance, and I do work for the U.S. Chess Federation, where we have this women's program that I mentioned earlier. There's so many people invested in seeing those numbers go up because they know how important it is to educate girls in fields like chess, because it's a natural gateway to STEM fields.
Right.
So people are really invested in it. And they think that it's really important to educate people the right way, whether it's girls or boys. I don't see that same like attention to pedagogy in poker, because people don't necessarily see it as a positive for like education. And I think that it certainly can be, especially if you're talking about financial education. So that's one difference I see, that I think that chess, there's a lot of people who are really invested in making things work for girls and women. And I'm seeing very positive things in poker as well. I just think that maybe in chess, it's even more rigorous because of the aspect of the children involved. And that's good.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess, if somebody says they play chess, you think, ooh, they're really smart. And if somebody says they play poker, you think, oh, they're a degenerate. Right? So there's sort of a stigma with it too.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're overcoming that to some extent.
So.
I mean, I think people like, Maria Konnikova, and, right, Liv Boeree, people like that who are doing like these incredible mainstream things with poker that show the positive side, how it can be good for your decision making and your psychology and your relationships. I hope that that's starting to spread, because that's definitely the way that I see poker.
Yeah, I love Liv's talk that she did. John, did you have something to add there?
Well, just kind of going on with what Jen was saying, are you still the Mind Sports ambassador for Poker Stars?
Yes, I am.
And I know a few years ago you did like a chess poker combination thing, and I don't remember any of the details, but what are you doing with that right now?
Well, yeah, I did a couple of chess poker combinations. I feel like I've done all of them. We've had so many fun events. One of the most remarkable ones was before the Poker Stars Players Championship in the Bahamas. I had a contest where people to create a game that involved randomness and chess. And so they had to create a game from scratch. And that was like so fun because people came up with such great ideas. And we actually had 50-50 from the poker community and the chess community as the finalists. I mean, like the primary community that they belong to. And on top of that, we had 50-50 male female. So half the finalists were women, half of them were men. And in the end, and we also had a special match to celebrate this incredible competition where I partnered up with Daniel Negreanu and Liv Marie partnered up with Danny Ranch, who is the chief operating officer at chess.com and an IM. And we played this like tandem match. So it had this great synergy. The winner ended up being Warren Sheaves, who created a really brilliant game. But that was one of the most memorable, and he got a platinum pass worth $30,000 for his creation. That was definitely a very memorable combination. I think right now, actually, a new podcast that I launched, The Grid, is probably the pinnacle of my work that combines chess and poker because it's very chess inspired. The Grid actually does not refer to the 8x8 chessboard, but rather to the 13x13 grid that we now see so ubiquitous for poker training.
It's such a cool concept. I haven't listened, but I read a little bit about it. I'm super excited because I don't know who it was. Somebody did the King 4 hand, right?
That was Lex.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was Lex. Yeah. So talk a little bit more about that. Promote that a little bit and tell people kind of what you're doing with that podcast.
Well, yeah, as you can see, there's a relationship between chess because we're now looking at kind of the chessboard of poker, the way that I see it, and how I see it is that in my life, I feel I've been so lucky to be exposed to chess and poker as well as art and literature, which is what I studied in college. And rather than think that these things are divorced, much like the great artist Marcel Duchamp, I see that there's a lot of interplay in art and chess and poker. And so it's kind of like nails on a chalkboard to me whenever somebody talks about how math and game theory is destroying the creativity of poker. Because I understand why they're saying that. I get it. They think that people are like, just memorizing strategies and executing them like robots. But the thing is, I feel like anybody who's actually put serious work into something like game theory and math and solvers, like if you've actually put in hours, you see that it actually expands your creativity, not limits it. Because you become better at chunking different types of hands. You see that things are possible that you never thought were possible before. So personally, I can see how it could become something that makes you more rigid, but that's certainly not the only way that it can be used. And that was part of the inspiration for me for The Grid, to show how this idea of thinking in boxes can actually be very creative. And so my podcast is talking to 169 different poker players about all the 169 combinations. So it's like a game within a game. Not only am I doing these kind of bite-sized interviews where they describe their hand, but I'm also hunting down the 169 hands.
It's a super cool concept. I mean, congratulations on that. I think that's a super cool concept. Hopefully you've had some good early reviews on that.
Oh yeah. I mean, the issue for me is like, I feel right now, like all the interviews have been so wonderful. Like my guests have been so great. And I know that it's going to get harder because at some point, like there's 169 hands and like once a combo is taken, they can't talk about it.
Right.
So I know I might get this amazing guest and they're like, I want to talk about like Jack 8 suited. I have like the greatest hand. And I'm like, well, sorry, like Lex already took that hand. Like you have to come up with something else.
Well, it gives them incentive to reach out to you sooner than later. I mean, if you're a great player and you want to talk about a certain hand, reach out to Jen now. Like, don't wait for her to approach you with 7-3 offsuit.
Yeah, that hasn't been taken. And I am like, if I have a friend or if there's like a televised hand that I know is like really amazing, I stop some of them. I have a spreadsheet. So I have like reserved some of them myself, and I have like some players who've reserved them. But yeah, it's definitely really fun. And I think it's important. I mean, actually, I think it's part of poker training because uh, in art, sometimes we talk about negative space. And I think that one of the issues that players sometimes have, especially if they don't play heads up, is that there's this entire morass of hands that they don't really play. And it just feels like, okay, they're all equally bad. But, well, they're not really equally bad. And also, they're there. And it's important to know that they're there when, for instance, it gets folded to you in the small blind and you end up playing against a range that includes almost every hand. So, yeah, I think that that's part of the reason for the podcast as well, that I think it's actually, even if you don't like that kind of studying with solvers, which is totally legitimate because it could be really bad for some people, there are probably some things you can get from thinking about the grid in that kind of spatial way.
That's so good. And so you kind of mentioned that you've got the art and the science, both pieces. You also mentioned Marcel Duchamp. You want to talk a little bit about the art of chess?
Oh, wow. It's such a big topic. I'm on the board of this amazing chess museum in St. Louis called the World Chess Hall of Fame. And there have just been so many artists throughout history that have created work around chess because it's such a great canvas for creativity. It's constricted sculpture. The chessboard is like a mirror of your brain. And there's just so many different ways to take it. Yoko Ono created it. A great chess piece called Play It by Trust, where all of the pieces were white. And her idea was that at some point you wouldn't know who was on move and that you'd have to make a draw. So it was kind of this pacifist chess set.
Huh.
I've created a lot of work with my husband around chess and art as well. So it's really like a limitless topic, honestly. I mean, it's just amazing. Like if you go to worldchesshalloffame.org, you'll see all of the different exhibits that they've had in the last 5 years, and you'll be shocked. You like, I thought there might be like one exhibit on the art of chess. You might think, no, it's really like limitless. There's so many ways to take it.
That's cool. So, and then your other book, Play Like a Girl. Let's talk about that.
Well, that's a book because I realized at some point that some younger children and their parents might not want to buy a chess bitch. So I Play Like a Girl is more like a workbook, like chess exercises all executed by female chess champions. And the idea is that these chess tactics are just work things that will make your brain sharper and help you with your pattern recognition. But incidentally, they're all executed by female chess champions. And I think that just has a great effect on women.
That's so good. Well, I'd love to kind of hear, we've got a pretty captive audience here. You've got, I know a number of women that are listening to the show. Like anything, it's mostly male dominated in poker, but I know a number of women every week that are talking to me about how they like the show or whatever. So I know they're listening. So I kind of want to ask you a couple of questions here. One is, what would you want to say to the female recreational players that are listening to you right now? And then what would you want to say to the male recreational players that are out there listening to you right now, as far as those who are, concerned or hopeful about, greater diversity in the gender space?
Well, let's see. For women, I would say that it's always great to play online if you haven't tried it yet. Because a lot of women, I think, are attracted to poker because it makes you feel like special and exciting to be playing and be one of the few women. For some people, it's intimidating, but for a lot of people who gravitate towards poker, they like that. But in order to get the fundamentals, it's so important to get in volume, and you can only do that online. So I think well, you can do it live, but it just takes a really, really long time. So I would encourage women recreational players, if they haven't played online, that's a great way to build your confidence and to try out different strategies that you're learning. And of course, it seems like in the United States, we're starting state by state, we're starting to regulate. But keep in mind that you don't have to live in the state in order to play online poker. So if you're like visiting a friend in New Jersey, you can play on PokerStars, right? So it's worth giving it a shot. And then to people who want to make women more comfortable at the table or get more women into the game, I guess just make sure that you're including women in your life in poker if they think that they're interested in it, right? It's all about the closest to home, I think, is the place to start. And obviously don't be a jerk, but I feel like you guys are so nice. Like there's no, you don't have any a-holes watching this podcast, right?
Well, probably, and you know who you are. No, I play the local casino. I play small dollar buy-in tournaments. I play the small stuff, and there are men who treat women really poorly, and sometimes they're doing it intentionally, sometimes they're not. But there can be. It's not a culture all the time, but there's enough of that. And I think there are people listening to this show that probably have not treated women with enough respect, or men either. I mean, just sort of treating all of humanity with enough respect. And so I think hopefully that's a challenge to everybody to kind of look at yourself, and myself included, and just say, am I acting in a way that is actually inviting and inclusive and respectful of all people? So hopefully there's nobody that's they probably tuned out by now after 4 weeks of talking about women in poker. They probably tuned out if they're of that ilk. But I would challenge all of us to continue to always look at that.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things that you might not realize, just that because women tend to get more attention in poker, if they are kind of running badly, just use social cues. Sometimes even if that you have started out having a good conversation with them, they might just be done and wanting to focus on poker because they're feeling a little self-conscious. People always notice when women are losing pots. So sometimes that like kind of attention is tough. It can be fun if you're winning a lot of pots, because then people might be just remarking on like how huge a boss you are. But if you're just, if you bet folded a few times or something, you could just start to feel like everybody's looking at you. So just kind of be attentive. And it seems like if she doesn't want to talk to you, just like you would if you were trying to hit on a woman, I think that, it's always nice to just like give some space.
Yeah, that's good. John, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, here in Minnesota, we're known for the whole Minnesota nice thing. But even with that, I would say somewhere around 5% of the guys at the table can be real jerks. And when that happens, I struggle with what I should do, because from one perspective, women are grown people and they can take care of themselves. They don't need me to step in and try to rescue them. That they are fully capable. On the other hand, I don't like letting that type of behavior go unchecked either. And particularly like with a dealer, I have no problem. If someone is being a jerk to the dealer, I will stand up for them, because they cannot stand up for themselves just due to their doing their job. So what do you think would be a good or appropriate way to react to someone being a jerk at the table?
That's a good question, because it kind of depends on the situation, like how bad it is. Because you're right, sometimes it could just be seen as, further escalating the situation, or, creating a new problem. So it really depends. I mean, I think when in doubt, though, I would probably err in the side of saying something, because from my experience, it seems that a lot of times people take the approach to say nothing. So if you're on the fence, I would think that it's nice just to show some support,
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's a good question, because there are times where I've done that, and I mean I'm not super confrontative, I guess, at the table, but if somebody's picking on anybody, whether male, female, young, old, whatever, I'll jump in and defend them too. But there are situations where people are like, hey, I can defend myself. Like, oh, sorry, I was just trying to help, and then it just kind of makes it a more uncomfortable situation, right?
Yeah, definitely depending on the situation. Because also maybe sometimes if they might be like trying to set up a dynamic, it might be kind of some part of their game plan.
Right.
So I think you have to just kind of take it on a case by case basis. But if somebody's really highlighting, like not like being a jerk, and they're not really referencing gender or anything or using any aggression, that would be a clue. But if they're really starting to like reference gender and get personal, I think that's like starting to be a clue that you should get involved and at least make it known that you don't agree with that type of statements at the poker table. Now, if it just seems to you that they're hassling the person and saying like you couldn't have bluffed there and you're making the assumption that they're doing that because of the gender, maybe you don't need to step in then because maybe that person actually wants them to think that they're never bluffing.
Right.
You know?
Which I've heard before. I've heard women say, oh yeah, they never think I'm bluffing, which is perfect.
Right. Some women might like totally love that guy is saying that. I mean, you can maybe like, kind of make eye contact or something like, but I wouldn't necessarily step in a situation that actually seems like it's more strategically oriented.
So let's talk a little bit about as we kind of close up here. Like, what are you doing now in the poker world, Jen? Are you playing much? What's sort of your involvement in poker?
Well, yeah, I've been really busy with chess stuff for the last few months as I've gotten this women's program set up. But now with the World Series of Poker coming up soon, I'm getting more into poker. And of course, starting this podcast is very inspiring to me. And then I am excited to play in the WSOP main and ladies event. So, and finally, I know that there's something really great on the horizon, and that's poker coming to PA. Because as a mom of a young child, it's really just so phenomenal to be able to play online poker. I've always loved online poker because I think that I like live poker because of the social and psychological aspects. But in terms of like becoming a better player, I always feel like it's a little easier for me to do that online because I get more volume in. So I've always really loved the online game, and the fact that regulated poker is coming to PA quite soon really keeps me motivated.
Now, some of the other guests have talked. We've asked them kind of, what do you think would be a big thing, sort of a breakthrough moment for women in poker that might draw more women to the game? And a number of people have mentioned, having a woman make the final table of the main event. Maybe winning it, but even just making the final table. And I know we've been knocking on the door several times over the last few years. Kind of, do you kind of have the same sort of thought there? Like that might be, one big thing that would put, the game more attractive to women, or what do you think would be a breakthrough? Success that a woman could have?
I think a couple of things. I think regulated online poker in more states or federally for certain would be really huge because online poker just fits the lifestyles of a lot of women. I think universal childcare in America would help too, because I think that there's a little bit of an issue for women, even if they don't have kids yet, they might be a bit more conservative with their money, knowing that there's this like huge bill, potentially forthcoming with like, sending their kids to daycare or that kind of thing. I think that it's almost harder to be like very risky with your money as a woman in the United States, especially if you think you might have children later. Now, some people might say that men have exactly the same issues, but I don't know. I personally think it's even more of an issue for women because the experience of pregnancy does, sometimes take them out of the job market for a few months. And you also have to prepare for those months, right? You need to have more of a nest egg, like quite literally. So even though it's totally unrelated to poker, I think that would help in America in so many ways for women to take more risks with their career, and men too, but I just think it would help women even more. And so those two things, and then a female world poker champion also. But I tried to give you a kind of out of the box answer as well.
Love it. I love it. That's why that's why it's so good to get different perspectives on different things. I think it just seems just from this one conversation, you're so wired at what's the core issue, which I love. That's what I do in my coaching and consulting practice, is really help people get to the core issue. So here's the problem or the symptom or the situation or whatever. It seems like you kind of naturally say, yeah, but that's a kind of a microcosm for the deeper issue, which is this. Or, I think I love how you're thinking about that kind of on the next level. So I appreciate that a lot. Now, if we think about, so if it's not you that wins the world championship, who's it going to be? Like, let's give me your pick. Maybe this is uncomfortable. Who are your top 3 picks for women winning the main event? Who do you think it'll be?
God, winning the main event. I mean, like no limit hold'em players. Well, I mean, there's, Liv Marie has had so many deep runs, and I know she's there this year. And she's obviously a great candidate. There's There's Maria Ho, of course, who seems to be going deep in so many things lately. I mean, these are kind of obvious answers. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But somebody, I mean, I have to pick my good friends, of course, Jamie Kurtstetter and Katie Stone, both of whom I know are working so hard in this industry for so many years.
Yeah.
And I really love and respect them both so much, and they kind of gone in different directions in certain ways. But like me, they are also very passionate about the online game. And I think that that's important for the tournament as well. And of course, I think that in general, the main event, really good for a young, fit player. So I'm not sure who else is coming up in the women's side who would really fit those lines. But yeah, I mean, Kristen Bicknell, of course, has won the women GPI a couple of years in a row. But it could be anyone, really.
Wouldn't it be so fun? It'd be so fun to have like a woman come out of nowhere, like John Hesp did on the men's side last year. Just a woman who's just sort of doing this recreational, comes out of nowhere and ends up making the final table. It'd be so much fun.
It would absolutely be really fun. I think it is hard these days, though. I think that the fact that they took the final table and they put it right next to the they took away the break. That's good in some ways, but it's also tough because it means that a woman or a man who's less known doesn't have that time to kind of bring their game up to speed. Certainly, I know Kelly Minkin has had several deep runs in the main event, so she's always very dangerous as well. There's so many great female players out there. I know Farah Galfon's been playing a lot of high stakes games, and last year she was pregnant and played the main event, and this year I'm sure she'll be back, and she's a really great player as well. So
there's a lot of great women players out there, and I think for us recreational players that aren't as locked into the scene as so many of you folks are, sometimes you kind of get lost on who's out there. But I think these are a lot of great names for people to research and look at and kind of see what they've done in their career, because they've done some incredible things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the same time, sometimes I don't like comparing like women with each other, because I think that it's like such a knee-jerk response, and sometimes it can be like it can almost be like a source of negativity occasionally. So yeah, I have mixed feelings with the obsession. Like, I agree that I would love to see a woman make the final table and win the main event, but I also don't necessarily like obsessing over like which woman it's going to be, because I think that it could come off. In one hand, it's empowering to fans, but it could also come off as like competitive, like who's the best one and who's most likely to win. And I guess that's the way that a lot of people think about poker, and I don't blame them. But it's really, really unknowable. I think there's so many factors that go into it.
Right. No, that's a really, really fair point. Well, there's a number of great candidates. I'd love to see any of them or any other woman. Let's get 4 or 5 of them on the final table this year. That'd be fantastic. Well, I want to honor your time. So I guess, is there anything that you want to share that we haven't touched on, that kind of on your heart, or projects that you're working on? You mentioned these great projects, or ways that people can connect with you. Kind of give us a wrap up platform, I guess.
Yeah, well, I've got my 2 podcasts actually. One is The Grid, and then I'm also involved with U.S. Chess Women. And one thing I do is I have conversations with top women chess players called Ladies Night. So if you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jen Shahade, I always update everything in those channels. So it's really easy to keep up to date with me too there. And then, as you know, it's always really nice to get subscribers and iTunes reviews, because it really helps just, keep people informed of your content.
Right. All right. Well, John, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask or to add?
No, I'm just think it's great to have had the chance to talk with you, and I've enjoyed listening to your the podcast you've been on over the years. And now you've added another one I need to listen to.
Oh yeah, definitely listen and let me know what you think. And I think I'm already subscribed to you guys on iTunes. So now that I've actually gotten a chance to be on this show, I just really love the way that you do it. I think it's really smart, and I'll certainly be listening to future episodes. I know it was Eileen Sutton who got us hooked in together, and she's great. And so, shout out to her for connecting us.
Yeah, she was just a fantastic guest, and it's like, oh, hey, you got to talk to these people and these people. I'm like, that's great. I'll definitely do that. Yeah, she's fantastic, and hers will be. I think we're releasing hers in a couple of weeks as well, so you'll be able to hear that pretty soon. But Jen, yeah, seriously, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy, but this means a lot. And like I mentioned before, we're just it's impossible for us to really have the right perspective without bringing in people that are sort of living that out. And so I really do appreciate that and all you're doing with chess and getting young girls, into STEM and those sorts of things as well, and making our world a better place.
Thank you so much.
All right, Jen. Well, we will be in touch, and maybe we'll get you back on at some point and just talk some poker strategy.
Yeah, maybe after we have some women in the main event, there will be like so much to talk about at that main event final table.
Right? Yeah, after your final table appearance, hopefully you'll still, be willing to come on the RecPoker podcast.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'll have more free time then. Because
right, good point. All right, Jen, we'll let you go there. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
All right, we're going to hang on here so you can just go ahead and hang up there and we'll keep going.
Okay, cool.
All right, thanks, Jen.
All right, so you want me to hang up now?
Yeah, you can hang up. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Bye, thanks, guys. Jen. See you. I hope to see you in Vegas.
I hope so, too. Yeah. I'll for sure do that. All right, John. Well, thank you for joining the call, John. I appreciate that. I know it's not our regular recording time.
Well, no, I've listened to her on several podcasts over the years. I don't even remember which ones they were because she wasn't the host of any of those, but just a guest on different ones. And I've always enjoyed her, listening to her speak. Very intelligent, and has a good perspective on things. And I think it's good to hear a different, nuanced perspective like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what I loved about our different guests. We had Lexi and Eileen Sutton and Diva on, all these different perspectives. And that's what I think is really helpful to kind of hear what are the common threads coming through that, but then also how are they thinking differently about it?
Right. And I mean, here we are, a couple of white guys talking about, improving diversity. But I think it's important that everyone thinks about it, and we need to figure out how to be more inclusive just in general without being patronizing and without, talking down to people or anything like that. And so I think this is a good step.
Yep, I agree. That's exactly the goal. How do we do those things? Well, we'll let you go, John. But yeah, thanks again, and we'll be in touch soon.
Sounds good.
All right, have a good night.
Yep.
Bye-bye.